do you think U.S. cars are better made than Japanese cars? Do you think?
I don't know. I don't know.
Do you think a Chevy is a better made car than a BMW in Germany?
I don't think automobiles would be the thing I would would
Well,
push for.
I'm just looking at an example that is, I think, a pretty relevant and obvious example, because cars are one of those things that we make and other countries make.
Sure,
And
but like if we're thinking about
definitely, I will tell you, my wife loves the Hondas and she loves the BMWs. I've never seen her even consider buying a Chevy.
What's up, everyone? Today we're diving into a fiery debate between Destiny and tax expert Tom Wheelwright, where Tom absolutely takes apart Destiny's argument on the U.S. tax structure, tariffs, and economic strategy. If you've ever wanted to see someone get called out for misinterpreting economic policy and dodging key issues, this is it. Let's get into it.
You mentioned something about how when tax rates are lower, like the growth is higher. Well, that's a bit of that's a sneaky statement. I'm not saying you're intentionally saying something wrong, but like when people said, for instance, that the Trump tax cuts spurred on the economy, that's true, of course. It's deficit spending. You would expect it to. Trump cut a whole bunch of tax receipts from the government, but continued to spend. But it's not fair that Trump gets to take credit for what's essentially deficit spending and say, well, the reason why is because we gave suppliers more money. You did, but you did it by not only allowing them to keep more money, but in a roundabout way, you're stimulating the demand side as well by continuing to spend at an exorbitant rate for the government as well, right? There's always like two sides to all of these transactions that everybody seems to ignore. Trump was just as much a demand side stimulator as any supply side alleviator because he deficit spent at record levels even before COVID.
Well, before COVID, his deficits were not nearly as big as they are right now under Biden.
That's
they were
true.
half.
Coming at it, but Biden has an excuse, right?
Biden has an excuse. What's his excuse? His excuse is, here's the problem, and I want to get just to this, and I really appreciate you bringing this up. His excuse is we have inflation. Okay, so because we have inflation, we have higher interest rates, and it's the higher interest rates that are causing that deficit to be so high. And the higher interest rates do, in fact, have a huge impact on the deficit. Okay, but where do the higher deficits come from? They come from the higher spending of the 2021, the March 2021 American Rescue Plan and the Trump 2020. Okay, both of those, neither one of those, my opinion, just in my opinion, were necessary to stimulate the economy. Both of them pushed demand side up without taking into account that we had this huge supply side disruption caused by COVID.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, there's just two quick facts on that. So one, you can say that they weren't necessary. I don't know if what we're competing against is a legendary, hypothetical, mystical version of America. We are outperforming every other country when it comes to inflation. So if we say that we could have done even better, that's fine. But you're talking about going from rank 1 to rank like super 1. Like the reality is whatever financial stimulus we did, which was higher than every other country in the world except I think Japan, it clearly helped us to some extent because we are buoying off like inflation better than every other country. Number one. Number two, Donald Trump's pre-COVID deficits were still larger than Biden's current deficits, even with COVID. Trump had no excuse to run deficits at that level prior to COVID. His economy was booming. Everybody involved in the markets and watching the GDP knew this. Why, if Trump was going to spend that crazy with no crisis, who's to say he wouldn't spend even more insane now, still after COVID, with inflation being high, or the year over year at least, the cumulative being high?
So prior to COVID, his deficits were lower than Biden's.
His spending,
his deficits were lower.
My understanding
is that his spending were, but his deficits were lower.
His spending at that point was the highest it had been in U.S. history for deficits, right? Before COVID, right?
It was higher, but Biden has far surpassed him.
Sure,
we're at $2 trillion this year.
Do what?
We're at $2 trillion for the first time this year in an annual deficit.
Sure, but again, it's in a post-COVID environment, right? So there's
right, but we're 2 years post-COVID. We're not 6 months post-COVID. We're 2 years post-COVID. And my point is, so here's what I want to get back to, if I can, Destiny. I appreciate your thoughts. Mm-hmm. Is that if you have this, you're putting all this money in, and you're going to get.
Tom isn't going to let Destiny slide here. He's saying inflation isn't just a side effect, but a predictable outcome of excessive government spending. The idea that inflation might be fine is a cop-out, and Tom's driving home that the Fed's mandate isn't to deal with Congress's spending spree, it's exposing how irresponsible government spending has left average Americans footing the bill, while the Feds scramble to control inflation and preserve unemployment.
Inflation. Because what I heard is that some inflation may be fine. It may be fine if you get inflation. The Federal Reserve, they have been very clear that their job is not to deal with spending. It's not the demand side from a spending standpoint. In other words, that's the government's job.
Sure.
Their job is to, their job is two things only. One is interest rates, interest rates and employment. So
Sure.
basically inflation and employment.
Just so
That's
everybody
it.
knows, when you say
Inflation and
spending,
employment.
you're talking about the government spending, right?
Yeah, government
Yeah.
spending. Right.
Yep.
Right. So inflation and inflation, they want to bring inflation down, and they want to balance that with employment. Right. That's their two mandates, according to them.
Would I be more proud? And this gets into very loaded, like normatively loaded territory, because people feel a certain type of way about base level manufacturing. You know, like, oh, I want to make cars again in Detroit and the whatever jobs, right? And I understand to some extent, like there are emotional ties to that, but like people aren't scrambling to buy China's airplanes or Russia's airplanes. They're scrambling to buy F-35s from the United States, right? Elon Musk didn't go to make SpaceX or Tesla.
Right. But there's a reason that they're not scrambling to buy Chinese electric cars, and it's only because of tariffs.
Do you really think that? You don't?
Oh, absolutely. Because we actually prohibit it. We don't just add tariffs. We don't let them sell their Chinese cars. When was the last time you saw a Chinese electric car in the U.S.?
Do you think that all of the higher level goods that the United States produces, you don't think they're that much better than any other part in the world?
No, absolutely not. No. Do you think U.S. cars are better made than Japanese cars? Do you think?
I don't know.
Do you think a Chevy is a better made car than a BMW in Germany?
I don't think automobiles would be the thing I would would
Well,
push for.
I'm just looking at an example that is, I think, a pretty relevant and obvious example, because cars are one of those things that we make and other countries make.
Sure,
And
but like when we're thinking about like,
I will tell you, my wife loves the Hondas and she loves the BMWs. I've never seen her even consider buying a Chevy.
Sure, but when we think about like one of the largest export markets I think we have is related to like information technology and services around like services around that. This is something that America does better than the rest of the world, right?
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
And I don't
And
see
right now, what you're seeing right now. So let's go to that one. So that's where we come back to this global minimum tax. What you're seeing is Europe is after those global technologies to tax them heavier, because yes, we're better. I mean, we're first. We're better. We own that. We literally own that market worldwide. Now, we're not better in things like semiconductors. Taiwan owns that market.
Tom dives into some raw truth here, completely undercutting Destiny's argument about American superiority. It's another reality check. The US isn't dominating every sector, and pretending that it is won't solve the problem. Destiny doesn't address how a high tax burden on US corporation actually drives them offshore, weakening industries like manufacturing. Tom's point about semiconductors isn't just about tech. It's about how overtaxation and lack of incentives push businesses away, making America more dependent on foreign markets. And Destiny's silence on this speaks volumes.
We're trying to get that over here, my backyard in Phoenix, where we got two big plants going on. One, we're trying to bring those Taiwanese semiconductors over here, which I think is actually I liked the semiconductor bill because of that. But the question, and so what other countries are doing is that they're actually, I think what's missing in the tariff discussion, and I'm not a huge tariff fan per se, what's missing in the tariff discussion is what other countries are doing.
Why wouldn't those, if we think that taxes are bad, if we think that taxes are bad in the United States, if you're telling me that they disincentivize investment and they disincentivize all these other things, why is it that taxes are good when other countries use them against us?
I don't think taxes are, I actually don't think our current tax rates, I actually think our current tax rates are pretty appropriate. I don't want to see them increased significantly because I think
would do for everything, right?
Which I think, because there's, again, what we were talking about. There's
Well,
this,
sure, but
there's this elasticity.
What is the explanation for it? Because it feels like when we talk about taxes in the U.S., it's like taxes are bad. We don't want to, like tax this stuff because it discourages all these horrible things, and we don't want the government using the money. But then when it comes to other countries, and it's like they put huge VATs on our stuff, and they put massive, taxations on all of our imports. Why is it that like taxes are good for those countries and it helps them, but it
doesn't help them? You said earlier our inflation rate is lower and our production is higher than every other country in the world. That's part of the reason. If you look at Germany, Germany has a 70% tax rate. 70%.
Which isn't that the point that tariffs might not be a good thing across the board?
Look, I think there are strong arguments because I spent a lot of time with my friends at the Tax Foundation, and they really hate tariffs. Okay, they really do. My challenge is I don't like this idea that that we pay taxes to other countries and don't expect them to pay taxes to us. I just don't like that. It's a competitive issue.
Wait. How do we pay taxes to other countries if there's a VAT and we said that most of the cost is passed on to the consumer? Aren't they just making their own citizens pay the taxes?
Destiny's take here is pretty short-sighted, and Tom's rebuttal is clear. These taxes aren't just an internal cost for foreign consumers, they're part of a larger structure that punishes American businesses and makes it harder for US companies to compete globally. The reality is that high production costs in the US already strain competitiveness, and adding foreign VATs onto our goods makes it worse. Tom isn't just schooling Destiny on how to trade mechanics, he's making it obvious how naive Destiny's perspective really is when it comes to challenges facing American industries.
Well, yeah, but their citizens are paying those taxes, but some of it, as you said, some of it is passed on to us. The producer is going to pay some of the tax.
Well, it makes us less competitive.
And it makes us. The tougher part is it makes us less competitive. Because, would you disagree that
that's why Trump wants the tariffs in general.
The cost of production in the U.S., the reason we import so much is the cost of production in the U.S., as a general rule, is higher than the cost of production in a lot of other countries. That's why we buy clothing from Vietnam. It's cheaper to buy clothing from Vietnam than it is to buy clothing made in the U.S.
Yeah, but it also frees up our citizens to, one, have a higher standard of living, and two, buy other things, right? Like if I want to buy a new instrument for my kid at a local shop that produces, high quality trumpets, if I can go to Walmart and buy cheap clothes, I can buy like a custom made US instrument at home. If all of a sudden we bring all our manufacturing back and now I have to buy, $50 for a pair of like children's like t-shirts or whatever because they're all made at home, I feel like there's an opportunity cost that's missing. It's almost like a broken windows fallacy.
I actually agree with that. I think that you have I would not want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. at any cost. Okay?
Which is what the tariffs are designed to do, right? So I feel like it just hurts us in every single way.
What I'd like to see is the investment incentive so that, for example, take Musk and Teslas, okay? Not a lot of people to make a Tesla. It's all robotics, right? And so it's innovation, it's technology. So what you want to see is rather than having it cheap because it's cheap labor and they're in sweatshops in Vietnam and Indonesia, you want it cheap because the technology's good. That's what I would like to see. I would like to see that's why it becomes cheap, not because of cheap labor.
I'd love to hear you guys' opinion down in the comments below whether or not you agree or disagree with a lot of the points that were made here in today's clip and debate. Also, be sure to give us a like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and we'll see you guys in the next one.